We're back. Noah, you were talking in the shadows of the train station. The question is, I think, for me is, do these national reporters, do they contact local reporters when they're coming in? I mean, at least perhaps to give you some kind of an orientation or a background in terms of what the lay of the land is?
I haven't, but I'd love to go out for a beer with these.
Well, I was contacted. I was contacted by them, and I went to a garden party. It sounds like old Rick Nelson song, and it says, if this is all they're right.
How was the party?
Well, the party was light on food. I mean, you could have better food, and it was basically long on discussion. I mean, you feel like a laboratory rat. They were asking you, what do you think about this, and what do you think about that? And I think Detroiters are perfectly capable of telling their own stories, and that's what I told them. I said, why should you write about it? I said, why don't you contact journalists here and let us write about it? Why don't you have the people in Detroit write blogs? Why don't they present what they think? I mean, we are literate in spite of the belief that we're not. So I opposed that to them, and they were not interested in that. And you say mainstream media, I say corporate media. They were very specifically focused on what they wanted to cover and how they wanted to cover. Anybody that would come up and talk about Brooks Patterson as an example of what's happening, and the politicians should remember the National Action Group in 1970, headed by Irene McCabe. They were the group that led to the enmity, that led to the blowing up of buses that was supposed to allow for integration in Pontiac. And Brooks Patterson developed his reputation based on supporting them, and this led to the Klan blowing up the buses. So for the last 30, 40 years, that's what this guy has lived off of, and he's presented as one of the people that's going to rebuild Detroit.
Well, the other issue for me on that, Noah, is the fact that, and Ryan, is that when I looked at the Dream Team, I mean, you can select whoever you want to be a Dream Team. You can select whoever you want. But I think what was missing in the Dream Team, there was no African-American male in the Dream Team.
Yeah, Rochelle Riley, I think, wrote about that in the Free Press.
And to me, that was, I don't understand how you can explain that.
It was certainly striking to me, and I think your point's well taken, especially about L. Brooks Patterson. I think if you were to ask most Detroiters, I can't back this up on any reporting.
We have to say people do redeem themselves.
Absolutely. I'm not backing this up on any reporting, but I would say if you were to ask most Detroiters what 8 people would you include, I don't think L. Brooks Patterson would be on that list. And I think Rochelle Riley had a good point, and I think there are other people. And again, there's 3 of us. We could have 20 different opinions as to who's going to be in that group.
Right.
But I think, Robert Bob's absence was a glaring absence. Wow. Luther Keith, I think, as Rochelle wrote, I think could be looked at as a glaring absence.
Well, we might have a difference about Bob, but I think one of the things that was really missing was you're talking about a working class town. There's nobody there who you might consider very clear, save John George or somebody like that, who's actually working class. I mean, it's almost like an absence of that group that built this city and that built America. I mean, it is like vicious. It's like you're cutting off the head of the very people on whose shoulders you stand. I mean, there would be no America.
And let me say, we welcome Stephen Gray from Time Magazine to really come on the program. He's welcome to come anytime. He was scheduled to be here, and he emailed me on the day of our taping to say that he cannot. He's on a deadline. But I think, for me, when I saw the absence of an African-American male, I think it was very striking for me.
That's true.
And there's no explanation.
80% African-American.
There's no explanation. It's almost borders on perhaps, I don't know, what, cultural insult, what it is. I mean, there's no explanation for it. It does not make sense. It does not make sense.
But it does make sense, Bankole, if you think about how African-American males have been and are portrayed. That is, if we don't have our pants slung low, and if we're not listening to hip-hop, and if we're not carjacking somebody, then we don't meet the national standards in terms of media.
And I don't support, I disagree with his lifestyle in the past, big and small, but he said something, the stereotypes of a black male misunderstood. But let's move the conversation forward, Noah. Where do we go from here, in terms of just covering the city? Because I think as reporters here in the city, we have to continue to tell the facts. I mean, regardless of whatever the editorial, the national editorial agenda would be, we still have to continue to do what we have to do.
Mm-hmm. And we try to do that at WDET in any number of ways, both in our local coverage and on our 2-hour news magazine that we have Everyday, Detroit Today. So we try to tell that story. For those journalists who come from other places and are perhaps staying at the Time House, or other journalists who are coming in, I just urge them that when they write their stories, when they throw out facts, that they truly fact check them. Because I find that in many cases, and I found several cases in some of the Time articles, where facts that some people they're repeated in article and because they've read it somewhere else, so they use it in theirs. Well, it's not true. I mean, I look back at one of the articles where they're talking about there are no national chain grocery stores in the city of Detroit, and I've seen that many places. Well, that's wrong. There are 2 Aldi stores in Detroit. Aldi has 1,000 stores in 29 states. I don't know what a nationwide chain is, but I think if you have 1,000 stores in 29 states.
Daniel Ockrent could have contacted you for some lecturing.
Yeah, or Meyer. Meyer just is opening up on 8 Mile and Woodward. Well, Meyer, okay, is it a national? No, but it's in 5 states.
It is. It's national. 5 states is national. I give you the last word.
But I got to say this. In fact, you mentioned the absence of an African-American male in relationship to certain things. I was really bothered by the suggestion that at the time when Ockrent was growing up, that African Americans were just sort of sitting on the sidelines and with their head in their soup because he was doing well and we weren't doing well. Well, that's an absolute lie. In fact, we had a very thriving community, and they ran the freeway straight through it. And I think that if national journalists are going to do their research, they need to have a sense of history. They need to come and talk to people, not only journalists, but pastors, rabbis, priests, and so forth, who give the substance to what a city is about before they actually strike out and do this. And I'll just conclude with this. At the party at Time, it was said that we moved into a neighborhood that was safe. That's not even correct. As a matter of fact, there have been more break-ins in Indian Village than just about anywhere else because it's presumed that they have money. So watch out, Time magazine, folks. They may break in and steal your magazine.
All right. On the question of substance, that's all we do here on Center Stage. And that brings us to the end of this week's edition. Thank you very much, Ron Scott, Detroit historian, journalist, and of course, WDET, Detroit Public Radio's own Noah Oshinsky. We'll be right back next week. I'm Banker Thompson.